So I thought I would do a story time talking about how I started my first business and almost 10 years later, where my business is at. My very first business was a handmade business, and it started completely by accident, as a lot of handmade businesses do, especially at 18 years old. I was in my freshman year of college, and it kind of started because my aunt and I were planning a tea party, because we used to have tea parties when I was little, and we loved doing just extra frou-frou things like that. Because I was a broke college student, the best way I could contribute was making party favors. So I searched Pinterest and decided to try making tile coasters. I went to Joann Fabrics, got some paper. I used my mom's Cricut that it was so old. It was one of those that had the cartridges that you had to put in the Cricut, and it only cut like the most basic things. And luckily, I was only needing to cut like 4" by 4" squares on paper. I got the paper cut, and then I got bath tiles from Lowe's. While I was in the trial and error stage of figuring out how to make these coasters, my papa, who I lived with while I was in college, he was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of brain cancer called glioblastoma. I moved in with my grandparents a month after I graduated high school because they lived closer to campus where I was going to college than my parents. So I got to stay with them, and I'm so thankful for that time. Because of my papa having cancer, my aunt and I had to postpone our tea party, but then I started making all of these coasters to have for when we did end up having the party, but it also just became a creative outlet for me to take my mind off of what all was going on around me. I was always very close with my grandparents. My sister and I were the only two grandkids growing up. I was very much a papa's girl. I started making these in March of 2016, and unfortunately in November of 2016, my papa had passed away from the glioblastoma. Somewhere between the time my papa had passed away and when I graduated from college with my associate's degree in May of 2017, I started picking up some sewing again. I learned how to sew when I was little for 4-H and hated it, but started sewing key fobs at some point during that time. After I graduated college with my associate's degree, I decided I wanted to take a year off of going to college full time. So I started working for the agency that my mom has worked at now for over 30 years, and I had previously been an intern at. And during that time, I started getting the itch to expand my handmade business by doing craft shows. I started out taking, I think, like 25 sets of tile coasters and some key fobs to my first craft show. I did 2 the first year I did markets, I think. They were like a month apart at the same location, but 2 different craft show organizers. In the spring of 2018, I took a very big risk and applied for a very big market up in the Indianapolis area and got in. I was so shocked. I took, I think, 80 sets of tile coasters, and they were in sets of 4. So do the math. That's a lot of tile coasters. They're so heavy. So I packed my little Nissan Sentra full, and my dad helped me build this PVC pipe structure to hang curtains on for a backdrop. And doing that show, I spent every penny I had preparing for it. And while I didn't make as much as I hoped, it was such a great experience. And I have gone back to that show every single year that I've been able to since the spring of 2018. Fast forward to early 2020, we all know what happened. And while we were locked down, I ended up making 100 pairs of pot holders. At some point, I started making these pot holders. So I just spent an entire week and filled up this massive moving box full of pot holders. And I can't remember at this time if I had been making the bowl cozies or not, which is by far my most popular product. I sell the most of these. Here's 2 examples in like this, I think of it as like a disco cowgirl kind of print, but you put your bowl in and it's for like hot soups or cold bowls just to protect your hands. After making 100 pairs of pot holders, I was like, well, what do I do now? Because I don't need any more pot holders for the foreseeable future, because we didn't know when that all would end and when I'd be able to go back to doing craft shows. During this time, one of my friends from college, because I went back in the fall of 2018 to college for my bachelor's degree. One of my friends was a dispatcher, so she was considered an essential employee, so she still had to go into work. So she had sent me a text and was like, hey, I know you sew. Would you be able to make me a few face masks that I can wear because of going to work? The easiest way to take care of the payment for her to pick out everything was to make listings in my Etsy shop that I had already had. I rarely had gotten Etsy sales up to this point, but within an hour of listing all of these fabrics, like not even pictures of ready-made face masks, I posted pictures of the fabric that I already had. Within an hour, I had, I don't know how many sales from people all around the country. And at this point, I only had scrap pieces of fabric. I had never made a face mask before.